Once there was a young woman named Sarah. She had a quiet life living in a small house near the city center. One day, as she was walking home from work, she saw an old man sitting by the side of the road. His clothes were torn, his hair long and messy, and he seemed very tired. His face showed signs of age and his eyes had a look of sadness. Sarah felt a tug at her heart. She had never seen this man before. She noticed he looked like he had been homeless for quite a while, and something inside her pushed her to do something kind. She decided to approach him. "Are you okay, sir?" Sarah asked softly, standing before him. The man looked up at her, his face softening. "I'm all right, miss," he said, his voice weak. "Just tired and hungry without thinking twice." Sarah said, "Would you like to come to my house and rest for a while? I can make you something warm to eat." The man hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Thank you, young lady. I would appreciate it." Sarah led the old man to her small home. As they walked together, she learned that his name was Thomas, and he had been homeless for several years. After losing his job and his family, he had no one to turn to, and the streets became his only refuge. When they arrived at her home, Sarah helped him inside and offered him a seat. On the couch, she quickly got busy in the kitchen, preparing a warm meal. She didn't know why she was so eager to help him, but something about Thomas made her want to do more. As Sarah set the food down in front of him, Thomas looked up at her, his eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you," he whispered, his hands trembling as he reached for the spoon. After the meal, Thomas leaned back in his chair, looking more comfortable than he had in days. Sarah sat across from him, curious to learn more about his story. "I used to be a carpenter," Thomas said, his voice becoming steadier. "I had a good life, a job I loved, a family I cared for. But one day, everything changed. I lost my job, and soon after, my wife left me. I didn't have the strength to keep going. The street seemed like the only place left for me." Sarah listened carefully, feeling a deep sympathy for him. She knew that many people faced struggles, but hearing Thomas's story made her realize just how difficult life could be for some. The next few days, Sarah invited Thomas over to her home regularly. She made sure he had food, and they talked about everything: his past, her life, and even the little things that made them laugh. She learned that Thomas still had a passion for carpentry, even though his tools were long gone. One evening, Sarah noticed something unexpected. Thomas had brought a small, dusty toolbox with him when he arrived. Curious, Sarah asked him about it. Thomas smiled, his eyes lighting up. "I know it's not much," he said, "but it's my toolkit, even if I don't have much else. I still have these tools. They remind me of who I used to be." Sarah felt a surge of respect for him. Even in his hardest times, he had kept something that mattered to him. As the days passed, Sarah noticed that Thomas had not only restored some of his old spirit, but he had also started working on small repairs around her house. One day, she came home to find him fixing the fence in her backyard. "Thomas, you didn't have to do that," Sarah exclaimed, surprised. He smiled back at her. "It's just a little something I can do. I don't have much, but I can still use my hands to make things better." One afternoon, as Sarah returned home from work, she found Thomas in the living room, carefully carving a small wooden figurine. It was a simple design of a bird, but the craftsmanship was incredible. Sarah couldn't help but admire it. "Wow, that's beautiful," she said, impressed by his skill. Thomas looked up and shrugged. "It's been a while since I've worked on something like this, but I still have the talent. It's part of who I am." Sarah felt proud of him. She had seen the transformation in him from a tired, defeated man to someone full of purpose again. The following weekend, Sarah took Thomas to a local market, hoping to find some supplies for his work. She had noticed that he had no proper tools, just the old ones he had managed to keep. She wanted to give him a chance to rebuild his life, so she bought him some new tools, ones that would help him get back into carpentry. Thomas was overwhelmed with gratitude. "Thank you, Sarah," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "This means more to me than you know. You've given me hope again." With his new tools, Thomas began working on small carpentry projects. Around the neighborhood, he fixed broken chairs, built shelves, and even made a beautiful wooden table for Sarah. People in the neighborhood started noticing his work, and some even hired him for jobs. As Sarah watched Thomas regain his confidence and dignity, she realized that the man she had once felt pity for was now becoming a success. Once again, it was a reminder that kindness and compassion could truly change a person's life. As time went by, Sarah and Thomas's friendship grew stronger. They spent more time together, and Sarah found herself admiring Thomas not just for his skill, but for his resilience despite all he had been through. He had never lost his love for his craft. One day, Thomas approached Sarah with an idea. "I've been thinking," he said. "I'd like to open a small carpentry shop. I know it's a big dream, but I have the skills, and I feel like it's time." Sarah smiled. "I think it's a wonderful idea. You deserve to succeed together." They worked on turning Thomas's dream into a reality. Sarah helped him find a small shop, and with her support, Thomas began to build a new life for himself. With time, Thomas became known as one of the best carpenters in the area. His work was in high demand and his reputation grew. People admired not just his talent, but also his story, a story of redemption, hope, and the power of kindness. Sarah's life also changed. As she watched Thomas grow stronger and more successful, she realized that she had learned a lot from him. He had taught her the importance of helping others, and how sometimes even the smallest acts of kindness could have a big impact. She knew that she had made the right decision that day when she brought Thomas into her home. It had changed both of their lives forever. One day, as Sarah and Thomas were sitting together in her living room, working on a small project, something felt different. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow through the windows. They had just finished a long day of work, and Sarah had made them both a simple dinner. Thomas was sitting across from her, a soft smile on his face as he talked about the things he loved. His old carpentry days, the little birds he carved, and the stories he'd heard about the city. Sarah listened, enjoying the peaceful moment. They had grown comfortable around each other over the weeks. She could see that Thomas was no longer the tired, sad man she had met at the street corner. He was becoming someone who brought life to her home, with his stories and his laughter. As the conversation slowed down, Sarah noticed Thomas looking at her differently than usual. There was something in his eyes, a softness, a kind of warmth she hadn't seen before. She felt a small flutter in her chest. "Sarah," Thomas said, his voice lower than usual, "I just want you to know how much I appreciate everything you've done. For me, you've helped me more than anyone ever has. You gave me a second chance." Sarah blushed, not quite sure what to say. She had been kind to Thomas because she cared about him, but now his words made her feel something new. She looked down at her hands, unsure whether she was imagining things or if something else was happening. Thomas stood up slowly and walked closer to her. "I don't know if I've ever told you this," he continued, his voice softer, "but being around you has made me feel alive again. I haven't felt this way in a long time." Sarah felt her heart race. Was he saying what she thought he was saying? She had always seen Thomas as a friend, someone who had gone through a lot and needed her help. But now, as he stood in front of her, looking at her with such kindness, she began to wonder if there might be more to their relationship. "Thomas," Sarah began, but she wasn't sure what to say next. She was confused. And yet, there was something in her heart telling her to listen. He smiled gently, his eyes not leaving hers. "I know I'm not young anymore, and I've been through so much. But the way you've helped me, The way you've believed in me, it means everything to me. I can't help but feel something special when I'm with you." Sarah's mind raced. She was a single woman, and she had never expected something like this to happen with Thomas. He had been a stranger, a homeless man on the street, and now here he was confessing his feelings for her. The room was quiet for a moment. The only sound was the soft ticking of the clock on the wall. Sarah didn't know what to do. Part of her felt honored, but another part of her was nervous. She had never imagined herself falling for someone like Thomas, someone who had faced so many struggles. But as she looked into his eyes, she saw sincerity, and something deep inside her made her realize that perhaps love could come in unexpected ways. Perhaps the bond they shared wasn't just about kindness, but something more, Thomas. Sarah said finally, her voice shaking a little. "I didn't expect this, but I'm glad you told me. I'm glad you trust me like this. I need time to think about it. I'm not sure where this will go, but I do care about you." Thomas nodded, understanding. "I didn't mean to rush anything. I just wanted to be honest with you." And with that, the air between them felt different. Not heavy, but full of new possibilities. Sarah wasn't sure what the future held, but in that moment, she knew that whatever happened, this was a turning point in both their lives. She smiled softly at Thomas, feeling something stir inside her, something she hadn't expected. The night continued, but now there was a new feeling between them, a feeling of possibility Sarah couldn't deny, that Thomas had brought something special into her life, and she couldn't help but wonder if this was the start of a new chapter. As the days went by, Sarah and Thomas's friendship continued to grow, and the bond between them deepened. One evening, as they finished a late dinner, they sat together on the couch, talking about the future and the plans they both had. There was a comfortable silence between them as Sarah smiled at Thomas, feeling grateful for his presence in her life. Thomas seemed to be in a good mood that night. He smiled back at Sarah, and for a moment there was a spark of something more in his eyes. He looked at her with a kind of tenderness that she hadn't noticed before, and Sarah felt a warm feeling in her chest. Without saying anything, Thomas slowly moved closer to her. His steps were gentle, almost as if he was waiting for her to say something. Sarah could feel her heart racing, unsure of what was happening. Before she could react, Thomas leaned in and gave her a small, gentle kiss on the cheek. The soft touch made Sarah's heart skip a beat. It wasn't something she had expected, but somehow it felt natural. She blushed a little surprised, but she didn't pull away instead. She looked into his eyes and saw sincerity, something that made her trust him even more. "Thomas, what's going on?" she asked softly, still feeling a little uncertain. He gave her a reassuring smile. "I think we both know that there's something special between us. I don't want to rush anything, but I just want you to know how I feel." Sarah felt a mix of emotions. She had been so focused on helping Thomas, on being there for him, that she hadn't noticed the way her own feelings had started to shift. She hadn't realized how much she had come to care for him until now. Slowly, Thomas reached out to her hand, offering a sense of comfort. Sarah took it, feeling a sense of calm settle over her. Without saying another word, they stood up together and walked toward her bedroom. The quiet between them was filled with a sense of anticipation, but neither of them was in a hurry. They took their time, letting the moment unfold naturally. When they reached the bedroom, Sarah felt a wave of nerves wash over her. She had never imagined things would progress like this. But as they stood there, Thomas turned to her with a gentle expression on his face. "Sarah," he said softly, "I don't want to pressure you. I just want to be close to you. If that's okay." Sarah nodded, feeling her heart swell. She didn't have all the answers, but she knew that she wanted to be with him in this moment. She trusted him, and she knew he respected her feelings. What happened next wasn't rushed or forced. It was slow, gentle, and full of care. They spent the evening together talking, laughing and enjoying each other's company. As the night went on, Sarah realized how much she had come to appreciate Thomas, not just for the man he was now, but for the person he had always been. Deep down, a man with kindness and respect in his heart. It was a new chapter in both their lives, one that they had never expected, but were both willing to explore. Taking things one step at a time,